Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind troubled with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Let my voice wash over you at a comfortable volume and allow yourself to be distracted from the stresses and worries that play on your mind. Whether you need help falling asleep or going back to sleep in the middle of the night, you can trust me to keep you company and help you to wake up tomorrow in a rested state. You may need to try out Sleepy Time Tales for a few nights to get used to this slightly strange idea, but I believe it will be well worth your while. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So settle down, relax, and allow yourself to get lost in my telling of tonight's story. Before we get to tonight's reading, I'd like to ask for a few minutes of your time. Sleepy Time Tales is a listener-supported podcast. I can only keep it going, paying for the services and tools I use, and justify my time thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. So if you're finding Sleepy Time Tales useful, if it helps you to get a restful night and you would like to keep it going out to thousands of insomniacs just like you, please consider supporting it on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. So go along there, take a look, and sign up if you're interested. And of course, if monthly seems a big ask, you can make once-off tips through the tip jar on the website. And if you'd like to support Sleepy Time Tales without having to do so financially, and times are tough, so I understand this completely, just spread the word. If there's anyone you know who is struggling to sleep, just tell them about Sleepy Time Tales and let them try it out and see where it goes from there. And that's enough of that. Let's get back to the rather dry, the blazing world. We return this week to the description of a new world called the Blazing World, written by the Duchess Margaret Cavendish of Newcastle. And we pick up with the Empress still quizzing her workers about the nature of the universe. The Empress asked whether it was not possible that there could be two souls in one body. As for immaterial souls, answered the spirit, it is impossible, for there cannot be two immaterials in one inanimate body, by reason they want parts and place, being bodiless. But there may be numerous material souls in one composed body, by reason every material part has a material natural soul. For nature is but one infinite, self-moving, living and self-knowing body, consisting of the 3 degrees of inanimate, sensitive and rational matter, so intermixed together that no part of nature, were it an atom, can be without any of these 3 degrees. The sensitive is the life, the rational the soul, and the inanimate part, the body of infinite nature. The Empress was very well satisfied with this answer and asked further, whether souls did not give life to bodies. No, answered they, but spirits and divine souls have a life of their own, which is not to be divided, being purer than a natural life. For spirits are incorporeal and consequently indivisible. But when the soul is in its vehicle, said the Empress, then methinks she is like the sun, and the vehicle like the moon. No, answered they, but the vehicle is like the sun, and the soul like the moon. For the soul hath motion from the body, as the moon has light from the sun. Then the Empress asked the spirits whether it was an evil spirit that tempted Eve, and brought all the mischiefs upon mankind, or whether it was the serpent. They answered that spirits could not commit actual evils. The Empress said they might do it by persuasions. They answered that persuasions were actions. But the Empress, not being contented with this answer, asked whether there was not a supernatural evil. The spirits answered that there was a supernatural good, which was God, but they knew of no supernatural evil that was equal to God. Then she desired to know whether evil spirits were reckoned amongst the beasts of the field. They answered that many beasts of the field were harmless creatures and very serviceable for man's use, and though some were accounted fierce and cruel, yet did they exercise their cruelty upon other creatures, for the most part to no other end but to get themselves food, and to satisfy the natural appetite. But certainly, said they, you men are more cruel to one another than evil spirits are to you. And as for their habitations in desolate places, we have no communion with them, can give you no certain account thereof. But what do you think, said the Empress, of good spirits? May not they be tempted to the fowls of the air? They answered, there were many cruel and ravenous fowls as well in the air, as there were fierce and cruel beasts on earth, so that the good always mixed with the bad. She asked further whether the fiery vehicles were a heaven or a hell, or at least a purgatory to the souls. They answered that if the souls were immaterial, they could not burn, and then fire would do them no harm. And though hell was believed to be an undecaying and unquenchable fire, yet heaven was no fire. The Empress replied that heaven was a light. Yes, said they, but not a fiery light. Then she asked whether the different shapes and sorts of vehicles made the souls and other immaterial spirits miserable or blessed. The vehicles, answered they, make them neither better nor worse. For though some vehicles sometimes may have power over others, yet these by turns may get some power again over them, according to the several advantages and disadvantages of particular natural parts. The Empress asked further whether animal life came out of the spiritual world and did return thither again. The spirits answered they could not exactly tell, but if it were so, then certainly animal lives must leave their bodies behind them. Otherwise the bodies would make the spiritual world a mixed world, that is partly material and partly immaterial. But the truth is, said they, spirits, being immaterial, cannot properly make a world, for a world belongs to material, not to immaterial creatures. If this be so, replied the Empress, then certainly there can be no world of lives and forms without matter. No, answered the spirits, nor a world of matter without lives and forms. For natural lives and forms cannot be immaterial, no more than matter can be immovable. And therefore natural lives, forms, and matter are inseparable. Then the Empress asked whether the first man did feed on the best sorts of the fruits of the earth, and the beasts on the worst. The spirits answered that unless the beasts of the field were barred out of manured fields and gardens, they would pick and choose the best fruits as well as men. And you may plainly observe it, said they, in squirrels and monkeys, how they are the best choosers of nuts and apples, and how birds do pick and feed in the most delicious fruits, and worms on the best roots, and most savory herbs. By which you may see that those creatures live and feed better than men do, except you will say that artificial cookery is better and more wholesome than the natural. Again, the Empress asked whether the first man gave names to all the several sorts of fishes in the sea and fresh waters. No, answered the spirits, for he was an earthly and not a watery creature, and therefore could not know the several sorts of fishes. Why, replied the Empress, he was no more an airy creature than he was a watery one, and yet he gave names to the several sorts of fowls and birds of the air. Fowls, answered they, are partly airy and partly earthly creatures, not only because they resemble beasts and men in their flesh, but because their nests and resting places are on earth. For they build their nests, lay their eggs, and hatch their young, not in the air, but on the earth. Then she asked whether the first man did give names to all the various sorts of creatures that live on the earth. Yes, answered they, to all those that were presented to him, or he had knowledge of, that is, to all the prime sorts, but not to every particular, for of mankind, said they, there were but two at first, and as they did increase, so did their names. But, said the Empress, who gave the names to the several sorts of fish? The posterity of mankind, answered they. Then she inquired whether there were no more kinds of creatures now than at the first creation. They answered there were no more nor fewer kinds of creatures than there are now, but there are, without question, more particular sorts of creatures now than there were then. She asked again whether all those creatures that were in paradise were also in Noah's ark. They answered that the principal kinds had been there, but not all the particulars. Then she would fain know how it came that both spirits and men did fall from a blessed into so miserable a state and condition as they are now in. The spirits answered, by disobedience. The Empress asked whence this disobedient sin did proceed. But the spirits desired the Empress not to ask them any such questions, because they went beyond their knowledge. Then she begged the spirits to pardon her presumption, for, said she, it is the nature of mankind to be inquisitive. Natural desire of knowledge, answered the spirits, is not blamable, so you do not go beyond what your natural reason can comprehend. Then I'll ask no more, said the Empress, for fear I should commit some error. But one thing I cannot but acquaint you withal. What is that? Said the spirits. I have a great desire, answered the Empress, to make a Cabbalah. What kind of Cabbalah? Asked the spirits. The Empress answered, the Jews Cabbalah. No sooner had the Empress declared her mind, but the spirits immediately disappeared out of her sight, which startled the Empress so much that she fell into a trance, wherein she lay for a while. At last, being come to herself again, she grew very studious, and considering with herself what might be the cause of this strange disaster, conceived at first that perhaps the spirits were tired with hearing and giving answers to her questions. But thinking by herself that spirits could not be tired, she imagined that this was not the true cause of their disappearing, till after diverse debates with her own thoughts, she did verily believe that the spirits had committed some fault in their answers, and that for their punishment they were condemned to the lowest and darkest vehicles. This belief was so fixed in her mind that it put her into a very melancholic humour, and then she sent both for her flower-men and worm-men, and declared to them the cause of her sadness. "'Tis not so much," said she, "the vanishing of those spirits that makes me melancholic, but that I should be the cause of their miserable condition, and that those harmless spirits should, for my sake, sink down into the black and dark abyss of the earth." The worm-men comforted the Empress, telling her that the earth was not so horrid a dwelling as she did imagine. For, said they, not only all minerals and vegetables, but several sorts of animals can witness that the earth is a warm, fruitful, quiet, safe, and happy habitation. And though they want the light of the sun, yet they are not in the dark. But there is light even within the earth, by which those creatures do see that dwell therein. This relation settled Her Majesty's mind a little, but yet she, being desirous to know the truth, where and in what condition these spirits were, commanded both the flower-men and worm-men to use all their labour and industry to find them out. Whereupon the worm-men straight descended into the earth, and the flower-men ascended into the air. After some short time the worm-men returned, and told the Empress that when they went into the earth, inquired of all the creatures they met withal, whether none of them had perceived such or such spirits, until at last coming to the very centre of the earth, they were truly informed that those spirits had stayed some time there, but at last were gone to the Antipodes on the other side of the terrestrial globe, diametrically opposite to theirs. The flymen seconded the worm-men, assuring Her Majesty that their relation was very true. For, said they, we have rounded the earth, and just when we came to the Antipodes, we met those spirits in very good condition, and acquainted them that your Majesty was very much troubled at their sudden departure, and feared they should be buried in the darkness of the earth. Whereupon the spirits answered us that they were sorry for having occasioned such sadness and trouble in your Majesty, and desired us to tell your Majesty that they feared no darkness, for the vehicles were of such a sort of substance as cat's eyes, glowworm tails, and rotten wood, carrying their light along with them, and that they were ready to do your Majesty what service they could in making your Cabbalah. At which relation the Empress was exceedingly glad, and rewarded both her fly and worm men bountifully. After some time, when the spirits had refreshed themselves in their own vehicles, they sent one of their nimblest spirits to ask the Empress whether she would have a scribe or whether she should write the Cabbalah herself. The Empress received the proffer which they made with all civility, and told them that she desired a spiritual scribe. The spirits answered that they could dictate but not write, except they put on a hand or arm, or else the whole body of man. The Empress replied, how can spirits arm themselves with gauntlets of flesh? As well answered they as man can arm himself with a gauntlet of steel. If it be so, said the Empress, then I will have a scribe. Then the spirits asked her whether she would have the soul of a living or a dead man. Why, said the Empress, can the soul quit a living body and wander or travel abroad? Yes, answered they, for according to Plato's doctrine there is a conversation of souls, and the souls of lovers live in the bodies of their beloved. Then I will have, answered she, the soul of some ancient famous writer, whether of Aristotle, Pythagoras, Plato, Epicurus, or the like. The spirit said that those famous men were very learned, subtle, and ingenious writers, but they were so wedded to their own opinions that they would never have the patience to be scribes. Then, said she, I'll have the soul of one of the most famous modern writers, as either of Galileo, Cavendish, Descartes, Helmont, Hobbes, H. More, etc. The spirits answered that they were fine, ingenious writers, but yet so self-conceited that they were scorned to be scribes to a woman. But, said they, there's a lady, the Duchess of Newcastle, which although she is not one of the most learned, eloquent, witty, and ingenious, yet she is a plain and rational writer. For the principle of her writings is sense and reason, and she will without question be ready to do all the service she can. That lady, answered the Empress, will I choose for my scribe. Neither will the Emperor have reason to be jealous, she being one of my own sex. In truth, said the spirit, husbands have reason to be jealous of platonic lovers, for they are very dangerous, as being not only intimate and close, but subtle and insinuating. You say well, replied the Empress, wherefore I pray send me the Duchess of Newcastle's soul, which the spirit did. And after she came to wait on the Empress at her first arrival, the Empress embraced and saluted her with a spiritual kiss. Then she asked her whether she could write. Yes, answered the Duchess's soul, but not so intelligibly that any reader whatsoever may understand it, unless he be taught to know my characters. My letters are rather like characters than well-formed letters. Said the Empress, you were recommended to me by an honest and ingenious spirit. Surely, answered the Duchess, the spirit is ignorant of my handwriting. The truth is, said the Empress, he did not mention your handwriting, but he informed me that you write sense and reason, and if you can but write so, that any of my secretaries may learn your hand. They shall write it out fair and intelligible. The Duchess answered that she questioned not, but it might easily be learned in short time. But, said she to the Empress, what is it that your Majesty would have written? She answered, the Jews Cabbalah. Then your only way for that is, said the Duchess, to have the soul of some famous Jew. Nay, if your Majesty please, I scruple not, but you may as easily have the soul of Moses as of any other. That cannot be, replied the Empress, for no mortal knows where Moses is. But, said the Duchess, humane souls are immortal. However, if this be too difficult to be obtained, you may have the soul of one of the chief rabbis or sages of the tribe of Levi, who will truly instruct you in that mystery. Whenas, otherwise, your Majesty will be apt to mistake, and 1,000 to 1 will commit gross errors. No, said the Empress, for I shall be instructed by spirits. Alas, said the Duchess, spirits are as ignorant as mortals in many cases. For no created spirits have a general or absolute knowledge, nor can they know the thoughts of men, much less the mysteries of the great Creator, unless he be pleased to inspire into them the gift of divine knowledge. Then I pray, said the Empress, let me have your counsel in this case. The Duchess answered, if your Majesty will be pleased to hearken to my advice, I would desire you to let that work alone. For it will be of no advantage either to you or your people, unless you are of the Jewish religion. Nay, if you were, the vulgar interpretation of the Holy Scripture would be more instructive, and more easily believed than your mystical way of interpreting it. For had it been better and more advantageous for the salvation of the Jews, surely Moses would have saved after ages that labor by his own explanation, he being not only a wise but very honest, zealous, and religious man. Wherefore the best way, said she, is to believe with the generality, the literal sense of the Scripture, and not to make interpretations, everyone according to his own fancy, but to leave that work for the learned, or those who have nothing else to do. Neither do I think, said she, that God will damn those that are ignorant therein, or suffer them to be lost for want of a mystical interpretation of the Scripture. Then, said the Empress, I'll leave the Scripture, and make a philosophical Cabbalah. The Duchess told her that sense and reason could instruct her over nature as much as could be known, and as for numbers, they were infinite, but to add nonsense to infinite would breed a confusion, especially in human understanding. Then, replied the Empress, I'll make a moral Cabbalah. The only thing, answered the Duchess, in morality is but to fear God and to love his neighbor, and this needs no further interpretation. But then I'll make a political Cabbalah, said the Empress. The Duchess answered that the chief and only ground in government was but reward and punishment, and required no further Cabbalah. But, said she, if your Majesty were resolved to make a Cabbalah, I would advise you rather to make a poetical or romantical Cabbalah, wherein you may use metaphors, allegories, similitudes, and interpret them as you please. With all that, the Empress thanked the Duchess, and embracing her soul, told her that she would take her counsel. She made her also her favorite, and kept her some time in that world, and by this means the Duchess came to know and give this relation of all that passed in that rich, populous, and happy world. And after some time the Empress gave her leave to return to her husband and kindred into her native world, but upon condition that her soul should visit her now and then, which she did. And truly the meeting did produce such an intimate friendship between them that they became platonic lovers, though they were both females. One time, when the Duchess, her soul, was with the Empress, she seemed to be very sad and melancholy, at which the Empress was very much troubled, and asked her the reason of her melancholic humour. Truly, said the Duchess to the Empress, for between dear friends there's no concealment, they being like several parts of one united body. My melancholy proceeds from an extreme ambition. The Empress asked what the height of her ambition was. The Duchess answered that neither she herself nor no creature in the world was able to know either the height, depth, or breadth of her ambition. But, said she, my present desire is that I would be a great princess. The Empress replied, so you are, for you are a princess of the 4th or 5th degree. For duke or duchess is the highest title or honor that a subject can arrive to, as being next to a king's title. And as for the name of a prince or princess, it belongs to all who are adopted to the crown, so that those that can add crown to their arms are princes, and therefore a duke is a title above a prince. For example, the Duke of Savoy, the Duke of Florence, the Duke of Lorraine, as also kings' brothers, are not called by the name of princes, but dukes, this being the higher title. "'Tis true," answered the Duchess, "unless it be a king's eldest sons, and they are created princes." "Yes," replied the Empress, "but no sovereign does make a subject equal to himself, such as kings' eldest sons partly are. And although some dukes be sovereigns, yet I have heard that a prince by his title is sovereign, by reason the title of a prince is more a title of honor than of sovereignty. For as I said before, it belongs to all that are adopted to the crown." "Well," said the Duchess, "setting aside this dispute, my ambition is that I would fain be as you are, that is, an empress of a world, and I shall never be at quiet until I be one." "I love you so well," replied the Empress, "that I wish with all my soul you had the fruition of your ambitious desire, and I shall not fail to give you my best advice how to accomplish it. The best informers are the material spirits, and they'll soon tell you whether it be possible to obtain your wish." "But," said the Duchess, "I have little acquaintance with them, for I never knew any before the time you sent for me." "They know you," replied the Empress, "for they told me of you, and were the means and instrument of your coming hither. Wherefore I'll confer with them, and inquire whether there be not another world whereof you may be Empress as well as I am of this." No sooner had the Empress said this, but some immaterial spirits came to visit her, of whom she inquired whether there were but 3 worlds in all, to wit, the blazing world where she was in, the world which she came from, and the world where the Duchess lived. The spirits answered that there were more numerous worlds than the stars which appeared in those 3 mentioned worlds. Then the Empress asked whether it was not possible that her dearest friend, the Duchess of Newcastle, might be Empress of one of them. "Although there be numerous, nay infinite worlds," answered the spirits, "yet none is without government. But is none of these worlds so weak," said she, "that it may be surprised or conquered?" The spirits answered that Lucian's world of lights had been for some time in a snuff, but of late years one Helmont had got it, who, since he was the emperor of it, had so strengthened the immortal parts thereof with mortal outworks, that it was for present impregnable. Said the Empress, "If there be an infinite number of worlds, I am sure, not only my friend the Duchess, but any other might obtain one." "Yes," answered the spirits, "if those worlds were uninhabited. But they are as populous as this your Majesty governs." "Why," said the Empress, "it is not possible to conquer a world." "No," answered the spirits, "but for the most part conquerors seldom enjoy their conquest, for they, being more feared than loved, most commonly come to an untimely end." "If you'll but direct me," said the Duchess to the spirits, "which world is easiest to be conquered, Her Majesty will assist me with means, and I will trust to fate and fortune. For I had rather die in the adventure of noble achievements than live in obscure and sluggish security. Since by one I may live in a glorious fame, and by the others I am buried in oblivion." The spirits answered that the lives of fame were like other lives, for some lasted long and some died soon. "'Tis true," said the Duchess, "but yet the shortest lived fame lasts longer than the longest life of man." "But," replied the spirits, "if occasion does not serve you, you must content yourself to live without such achievements. That may gain you a fame. But we wonder," proceeded the spirits, "that you desire to be Empress of a terrestrial world, when you can create yourself a celestial world if you please." "What?" said the Empress. "Can any mortal be a creator?" "Yes," answered the spirits, "for every human creature can create an immaterial world, fully inhabited by immaterial creatures, and populous of immaterial subjects such as we are, and all within the compass of the head or skull. Nay, not only so, but he may create a world of what fashion and government he will, and give the creatures thereof such motions, figures, forms, colours, perceptions, etc., as he pleases, and make whirlpools, lights, pressures, and reactions, etc., as he thinks best. Nay, he may make a world full of veins, muscles, and nerves, all these to move by one jolt or stroke. Also, he may alter that world as often as he pleases, or change it from a natural world to an artificial. He may make a world of ideas, a world of atoms, a world of lights, whatsoever his fancy leads him to. And since it is in your power to create such a world, what need you to venture life, reputation, and tranquility to conquer a gross material world? For you can enjoy no more of a material world than a particular creature is able to enjoy, which is but a small part, considering the compass of such a world, and you may plainly observe it by your friend the Empress here, which, although she possesses a whole world, yet enjoys she but a part thereof. Neither is she so much acquainted with it that she knows all the places, countries, and dominions she governs. The truth is, a sovereign monarch has the general trouble, but the subjects enjoy all the delights and pleasures in parts. For it is impossible that a kingdom, nay, a country, should be enjoyed by one person at once, except you take the pains to travel into every part, and enjoy the inconveniences of going from one place to another. Wherefore, since glory, delight, and pleasure lives but in other men's opinions, and can neither add tranquillity to your mind nor give ease to your body, why should you desire to be empress of a material world, and be troubled with the cares that attend government? When as by creating a world within yourself you may enjoy all, both in whole and in parts, without control or opposition, and may make what world you please, and alter it when you please, and enjoy as much pleasure and delight as a world can afford you. You have converted me, said the Duchess to the spirits, from my ambitious desire. Wherefore I'll take your advice, reject and despise all the worlds without me, and create a world of my own. The Empress said, if I do make such a world, then I shall be mistress of two worlds, one within and the other without me. That your Majesty may, said the spirits, and so left these two ladies to create two worlds within themselves, who did also part from each other, until such time as they had brought their worlds to perfection. The Duchess of Newcastle was most earnest and industrious to make her world, because she had none at present. And first she resolved to frame it according to the opinion of Thales. But she found herself so much troubled with demons that they would not suffer her to take her own will, but forced her to obey their orders and commands, which she being unwilling to do left off from making a world that way, and began to frame one according to Pythagoras' doctrine. But in the creation thereof she was so puzzled with numbers, how to order and compose the several parts, that she, having no skill in arithmetic, was forced also to desist from the making of that world. Then she intended to create a world according to the opinion of Plato, but she found more trouble and difficulty in that than in the two former. For the numerous ideas having no other motion but was derived from her mind, whence did they flow and issue out, made it a far harder business to her to impart motion to them, and puppet players having given motion to every several puppet, insomuch that her patience was not able to endure the trouble which those ideas caused her. Therefore she annihilated also that world, and was resolved to make one according to the opinion of Epicurus, which had no sooner begun, but the infinite atoms made such a mist that it quite blinded the perception of her mind. Neither was she able to make a vacuum as a receptacle for those atoms, nor a place which they might retire into, so that partly for the want of it, and of a good order and method, The confusion of those atoms produced such strange and monstrous figures as did more fright than delight her, and caused such a chaos in her mind as had almost dissolved it. At last, having with much ado cleansed and cleared her mind of these dusty and misty particles, she endeavored to create a world according to Aristotle's opinion. But remembering that her mind, as most of the learned hold it, was immaterial, and that according to Aristotle's principle, out of nothing, nothing could be made, she was also forced to desist from that work, and then she fully resolved not to take any more patterns from the ancient philosophers, but to follow the opinions of the moderns, and to that end she endeavored to make a world according to Descartes' opinion. But when she had made the ethereal globules and set them a-moving by strong and lively imagination, her mind became so dizzy with the extraordinary swift turning around that it almost put her into a swoon. For her thoughts, but their constant tottering, did so stagger as if they had all been drunk. Wherefore she dissolved that world and began to make another, according to Hobbes's opinion. But when all the parts of this imaginary world came to press and drive each other, they seemed like a company of wolves that worry sheep, or like so many dogs that hunt after hares. And when she found a reaction equal to those pressures, her mind was squeezed together, that her thoughts could neither move forward nor backward, which caused such a horrible pain in her head that although she had dissolved that world, yet she could not, without much difficulty, settle her mind and free it from that pain which those pressures and reactions had caused in it. And on that slightly concerning expression of the imagination, I'm going to call it a night. As always, if you'd like to pick up where I'm leaving off, the original is on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.